Welcome into another edition of the Prep Extra podcast. I'm Colton Stone alongside, as always, Chris Basnett. Well, if you liked the chaos and entertainment of the girls' state basketball week, why don't we double it?
Yes, sir.
And let's take a look at some boys' state basketball.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Before we get into that, obviously we had a good run by the Lincoln High girls in Class A. Big resurgence for the Lynx with Dominique Kelly. Seemed like they were right there. They had things rolling in the first half against Millard South, and looks like the Patriots kind of just finally got over that hump. They had, a senior class that won so many games, and they finally put things together. So, But shout out to the Lynx for the run that they had and the shot they gave it there in the title.
If you would have told Dominique Kelly you're going to lead by 7 after the first quarter, you're going to be within striking distance in the third quarter, I'm guessing she would have taken that before the tournament starts, because Millard South was probably feeling that pressure, like you said, with that senior class not getting over the hump. But just so talented offensively, and we saw them get hot, and that was the difference. Lincoln High scored 60-plus points in the state championship, and that's good enough to win it a lot of years. Problem is the other team scored 72 this year, and so you just give credit where credit's due. Millard South was the best team all year, proved at the state tournament, dominated those first 2 rounds, and picked up a really nice one in the final. But, you have to give credit to Lincoln High and Dominique Kelly from where that program was, before Dominique got there to these last couple years. Really, really impressive. So, shout out to the Lynx. Great season. That was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and it was a very up and down girls' state tournament. You had a lot of, seemed like 20, 30-point wins. You had a lot of, late comebacks. You had a lot of close games. So, I have a feeling we're going to see more of the same going to the boys' state tournament as well. Looking at Class A, much like the girls' state tournament, a lot of LPS flavor. You got North Star taking on Bell West in the 1-8 game. You have Lincoln Southeast taking on Gretna, and then East in the 4-5 game against Westside. What's the maybe overarching theme for the LPS schools? I know we talk a lot, power lies in Omaha.
Yeah. Can
one of these LPS schools not only get to the semifinals, but how can they make a run to a title game?
The thing is they can, and I think that's the thing you have to look at is they can do it. And there's been some years where there's been 0 Lincoln teams in the Class A state tournament. I was doing some research today. This is the first year since 2009 we've had 3 Lincoln teams in Class A. And all you have to do is go look at the results. Southeast lost a really close game to Gretna early in the year. Played Millard North first game of the year and had the Mustangs down double digits in the second half before they lost in overtime. East beat Westside by 16 less than a month ago. So North Star beat Creighton Prep early in the year, beat Gretna to get to state. That's 2 top 5 teams in the state. Now, look, Bellevue West is a different animal. We all know that. They're the pretty prohibitive favorite here. But I think the rest of it is pretty wide open. These Lincoln teams have proven they can beat anybody, play with anybody. And it comes down to, like we've always talked about, on the right night, it's against the right team. Lincoln Southeast just has to beat Gretna once to get to the semifinals. And then they just got to win one more game to get to the finals. And same with East. You've just got to beat Westside once, and then you take your shot, probably against Bellevue West. North Star has played Bellevue West, so they're not going to be unfamiliar with what that looks like. They will understand what they have to do to have a chance in that game. So I think the overarching theme is if the mix is right, it could be a huge weekend for the city. Do they get 2 teams to the semifinals? We'll see. And then you get them to the semifinals, you get the crowd behind it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's East and Bell West in a semifinal, what do you think that crowd's going to look like? At Pinnacle Bank Arena with a chance for a city school to knock off the perennial favorite, the perennial power. And same on the other side. If it's Southeast and Millard North, for example, again, a city school against a team that's been there year after year after year. Those could be some crazy crowds, and you never know, So, for me, it's these teams have beaten up on each other all year in the city. We know that. But when they've gone into the Metro, they haven't always won these games, but they've been right there. And what we saw in the postseason was they kind of got over the hump in a couple of those games, Southeast and North Star especially. So, Class A, yes, there's a favorite in Bellevue West, but I think any other of those 6 teams can beat each other on any given night. It's just a matter of, is it going to be the Lincoln teams that do it?
Yeah, and if you had to maybe pick one of the Lincoln schools, maybe who got hot at the right time down the stretch that it may be in line to make a run, maybe more than the other two.
Yeah, it's I think it might be Southeast. As interesting as that is to say, as a 6th seed, they won the city championship. They've got a guy on defense in Bangot Dak that can neutralize a lot of stuff on offense. They've got he's a 6'9" rim protector, and there's just not a lot of teams that have that. He's really athletic. He can score a little bit for you, and so. Again, you're talking about a Southeast team that's seen Gretna and didn't back down, has seen Millard North and didn't back down. It comes down to how Southeast kind of handles the bright lights. They went and won at Creighton Prep in a district final. You don't just stroll into the birdcage and win,
right.
On any night, much less in a district final against a power like that. So Southeast is playing really, really good basketball. East is playing really, really good basketball. The one concern I might have for East is they're excellent offensively, and we've seen teams like that have struggles from time to time in Pinnacle Bank Arena. It's just a different venue. It's a different shooting background. It's all that stuff. But if they come out and play offensively like they have most of the year, they're going to be really tough out. And I think that makes that Bellevue West game, if it happens, a lot of fun because that's going to be a shootout. And East isn't going to be afraid of a shootout. They're going to be afraid to run with Bellevue West. So I think if you had to pick one to make a run, it's probably Southeast just because they would avoid the Thunderbirds.
Right.
But I wouldn't be surprised to see East make a run either.
Looking at Class B, Scott, you're number one on that portion. Platteview, you're 2. In that 2-7 game, you've got Berry School and Norris. Very young team. This is a team that's been to the state tournament in recent years, but that was behind a lot of seniors, behind a lot of juniors. And now you're looking at a team that, they may be making a collective run to the state tournaments in the next few years, but, maybe it's not this year. But then again, Platteview is a team that's very, if Connor Milliken scores 30, hard to beat him. Yeah. If you lock him up and make other guys shoot, you could win that game.
It's been a heck of a run for Norris, and I talked to Jimmy Motes today, actually. Just, you look at their last 3 games in sub-districts, they win by 3, 2, and 1 points. And all 3 of their game-winning buckets came in the last 6 seconds. And were all scored by freshmen or sophomores. It's 4 of their top 6 leading scorers are freshmen or sophomores. Their leading assist guy is a sophomore. Their leading rebounder is a freshman. The future is really bright, obviously. They've won 6 in a row. I think they've won 11 of their last 14, something like that. So they've kind of matured as this season's gone along. And they got hot at the right time. They've won 3 close games, and like you said, that's a tough matchup. You're going to ask probably a pretty young player to go guard one of the great scorers in state history, and Connor Milliken. But again, Plattview's not a team that's unbeatable. We've seen Wahoo, a C1 school, beat them twice, and Wahoo's a different animal, of course. But that's a game that you look at and you go, you know what? Norris has got a shot, and they've kind of had fate on their side these past couple weeks. So that'll be a fun one, kind of a quote-unquote home game for the Titans, so to speak. You look at the 3 matchups for area teams, Creed, Elkhorn, York, Scotts Bluff, make a pretty good case for all 3 teams winning those games. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. Elkhorn's played really well as of late. Creed stumbled a little bit. You never know what you're going to get with a panhandle team. That's no respect to Scotts Bluff or Sydney, but we just don't see them. We don't know. So I think if you're looking at Class B and you're looking at these brackets, Norris Platteview should be a lot of fun just because of the way Norris's games have gone. Jimmy Mote said today they're 8-1 in games decided at the buzzer. They've had 9 games decided at the buzzer, and they're 8-1 in those games.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So if you get to the last 10 seconds and you're Norris, probably feeling pretty good. Yeah. So we'll see what that looks like too.
Yeah, and you talk about that Elkhorn Creek game. Past years, Elkhorn's zone defense kind of eats teams alive. So, matter of finding a way to break that, and probably taking on Scott in that next game if you're Crete. Not an easy out by any means.
Yeah, I think Scott's the prohibitive favorite here. They have been all year. The only 2 losses are to 3 losses, 2 of them to Class A schools early. Yeah, Elkhorn Crete's going to be a slugfest. It's probably going to be the first one of 35 wins. That's 2 really, really good defensive teams, and then it's just a tall task against Scott. And no disrespect to Bennington, they're going to play the game. You don't play it on paper, but Scott, I think, is just such an overwhelming favorite in this bracket. It's going to take a special effort to beat them on the state tournament stage. But yeah, if your defense shows up on the right night, you hit a couple shots, who knows?
Looking at C1, A lot of firepower in C1. Wahoo, your 1 seed, 24-1. Probably lean to them being the favorite as well. Of course, again, we say if you go west of Kearney, we don't see those teams very often. But it looks like Wahoo, maybe Ashland, Greenwood, somewhere in there for our coverage area. But a lot of teams that it feels wide open, but also it kind of feels top heavy at the same time.
I think this is the most fun bracket in the this week out of any of the classes. That Wahoo Auburn first round game is unbelievable when you look at what Auburn's done. The last few years they darn near won the state title last year. Mm-hmm. They won how many games in a row before that? That's if you're Wahoo, you're going this is like the toughest 8 seed draw of all time for us. So two kind of contrasts in styles. Wahoo wants to get up and down and run. We know how Jimmy Weeks likes to play. They want to control clock, control possessions, and you can be sure they're going to try and do that against the Warriors. So that's maybe the game of the day, all classes, first round, is that Wahoo Auburn game. I'm just so fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by Ogallala Central City. Ogallala averages about 75 points a game, unbeaten. You're playing a Central City team that hasn't been to state since 1947. And also only has 3 losses. They're not coming down here because they got lucky. That's a quality team and a great first-round game. Ashland Greenwood's had a great year. The only team to beat Wahoo this year and beat them on Wahoo's home floor. So Sydney's won 20 games. The boys are following the girls down to state. Saw the girls win a game down here and get to the semifinals. They're going, well, we can do that. We can be in the semifinals. So just a fascinating bracket. You're right. I feel like Wahoo's probably the favorite. But at the same time, there's maybe 3 or 4 other teams that you look at and go, could make it pretty interesting. I think.
Yeah. Again, if I know we stress it a lot any given night, but if you get shots to fall, you get hot at the right time, anything can happen. C2, Freeman, your number 1 at 26-1. Seems like that's a Freeman team that's been kind of sniffing around the past few years. Mm-hmm. I look at C2 and it's kind of, can Freeman finally get over that hump and bring home a state title? You're
talking about another 1 seed that's got a really tough draw. You're playing an 8 seed in Gordon Rushville that only has 4 losses and made a district final last year. If you win that game, you're looking at Cedar Catholic, who's had a great year and has won a lot of games playing up, or Elkhorn Valley, who's only got 2 losses, in a semifinal. Then you go to the other side. Amherst beat Freeman at state last year. That's the 2 seed this year, the Broncos are. Norfolk Catholic's always going to be competitive. You know that. Donovan Trumbull, Tri-County, again, the only team to beat Freeman this year. I was at that game. Sorry, Falcons. That's the one game I covered yours this year. That's my bad. I beat them at Mudicus. And they've got guys that can score. They understand how Freeman wants to play. So yeah, again, it's a bracket where you kind of feel like Freeman's probably the favorite, but again, 3, 4, maybe 5 other teams that are going, we're going to have a pretty good shot at this thing too. And it comes down to matchups. It comes down to who's doing well on the right night or the right afternoon in this case for the C2 bracket. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think C2, C1, 2 really, really fun brackets with some really interesting storylines.
D1, you've got North Platte St. Pat 23-2 as your 1 seed. Maywood Hayes Center 25-2. Just going down, you look at something like, I know you can do it with a lot of these classes, but you go down and it's like these teams just aren't losing games. Yeah, right. Yeah. A handful here and there again, right night, but St. Pat's has been pretty dominant all year. So again, you hate to look at just the 1 seed and say, okay, they're going to win this thing, but they've looked the part all year.
They have. They've got a 1-point win over Maywood Hayes Center, which came in the sub-district final. That was a loaded sub-district. It was St. Pat's, Maywood Hayes Center, and South Loop, which was like number 1, number 2, and like number 8 in the power points. And then Dundee County Stratton, they have 4 losses. 3 of them are to Maywood Hayes Center. The other one's North Platte St. Pat's. So that's a team that's beaten everybody but those top 2 seeds. Elm Creek started the year in the top 5 in D1 in our rankings and has kind of hung around there all year. Ansley Litchfield has been hot at the end of the year, and then of course, how could you forget Howells Dodge, who is there every year in every sport. They know how to win in the postseason. What are they going to do against the Johnson Brock team that's kind of quietly had a really good year, 22-4, and we maybe haven't heard a whole lot about them because we've worried about these teams that have been out west, St. Pat's, Maywood Hayes Center, right. Dundee County Stratton. So again, I'm kind of like you. I'm kind of repeating myself, but it's a fascinating bracket, right? You kind of look like St. Pat's, maybe the favorite, won it last year, back again this year, but again, Maywood Hayes Center's got a pretty good argument. Johnson Brock, Howells Dodge, pretty good argument. They play each other in the first round. Dundee County Stratton's seen these favorites before, pretty good argument. So, again, it's a super fun bracket, one where it's going to be really hard, I think, to predict how it's going to shake out when it gets here.
And then finally, wrapping up with D2, big storyline from our point of view is, can the Parkview Christian boys sweep boys titles? Well, not D2, of course. They play six-man football, but can they get another boys title? Not exactly an easy draw, getting Falls City Sacred Heart, a team that you said it with Howells Dodge being there in every sport, state all the time. Sacred Heart seems like they're there in everything every year. It seems like they win a lot of things too. So so you look at Parkview, can they do it again?
That's maybe the toughest draw of anybody in the state, because you're playing Falls City Sacred Heart, like you said, in the first round. If you win that game, you're getting a Shelton team that's lost once. That was in their first game of the year to Elm Creek, who's in the D1 state tournament and was here last year. Or potentially Santee, a first-timer who plays res ball, wants to get up and down and run, and things can get kind of hectic, as we've seen when Winnebago comes down here and plays. We see what those games look like. Why not, again, another team that's had a really quietly, really great year and earned the top seed there. So Parkview Christian's guards, I think, are the difference here. They're just so good. They're so solid. They're led by Victor Koshalowski, who's an all-city caliber player playing for a D2 team. And so it's true in high school. It's true in college. It's true in pros. If you've got good guard play, that can take you a long, long way. And I think that's the difference for Parkview Christians. They've got three of those guys in the backcourt that can step up on any given night and carry that team. So it's funny looking at them as the 3 seed. We've had them ranked number 1 all year. They've only played 5 D2 teams, I think, all year. And you look at the scoring margin in those games, it's ridiculous. It's 86-20 or something like that. So the competition ramps up at state, of course, but you have to feel good about where you're at if you're Parkview Christian, if you can get by that first round game. And that's obviously no slouch with Falls City Sacred Heart. But I think you look at this bracket, Parkview Christian's been there. They won it last year. They win the 6-man title in dominating fashion. They're confident. And now they have the experience of being in those bright lights. And I think that really helps them here. Yeah.
You're looking at Parkview, it's a matter of, did all those games against higher competition, will that pay off again?
Yeah.
It tends to, but of course you run into a team that is dominant as well in D2. Anything can happen there. Exactly. But we'll be all over it. Hopefully we get some Lincoln schools into some semifinals. That way, we can get a PBA or Devaney rocking with some Lincoln schools like we did this past week at girls state basketball. So for Chris Basnett, I'm Colton Stone. We will have everything for you on the Journal Star, and we will keep you with it all week.